Right, so where are we up to? What was that? Yes. So, we're just going to look at what we got up to. That's right, we got up to the two dots, yeah? So the Gemora says that three, is that correct? I believe so. Do we do all the, yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, so what does that mean? You can have three purchasers, three buyers can join together. The Rashbam says, let's see the Rashbam straight away. Yeah, it's about a third from the bottom of the Omid. Sodesh yesh edim, if you have a field, yeah, Rashbam, yes, yeah, yeah. We're talking about how you can have can you join together three different owners to create a situation of chazaka. A field that there were edim that it always used to belong to Reuven, and Shimon was machzik in it for a year, because he claims that he bought it from Reuven. And after that, Shimon sold it to Levi with a star. Okay. So in other words, we know it always used to belong to Reuven. Shimon was machzik a year because he claims he bought it from Reuven. And then Shimon sells it to Levi with a star. Levi shana, and Levi is machzik for 1 year in that field. And then Levi sells it again to Yehuda. Because of the shtar mechira kedelekamon, and he writes a shtar mechira. He writes a document that that he sold it to him, as we're going to see later on. And he also has a machzik in it for a year. You got 3 years. Now, let's be clear. As we've always said often in the past, there isn't a debate about the person we call the Mori Kamon, the original owner. Everyone knows that Reuven used to own it, right? There's no debate about that, right? Reuven used to own it, right? And Shimon is machzik for that year, etc., and that's how it works. And everyone has it for a year after. So also Reuven will come arer, and Reuven comes along and questions. V'omen, he says, "Kilo mochor leShimon," right? And he says, "I never sold it to Shimon." Okay, now that's a bit of a problem because if Shimon never bought it, then the whole thing seems to fall apart. Yehuda Tayin, and Yehuda claims, "Hariech zaknu bein shloshtennu shalosh shonim." Together, we've had a chazaka for 3 years. V'lo machisa, right? And you didn't object. You never objected. You never objected, right? V'Shimon shelacha mimcha shanu bo mikoichoi, and Shimon, who bought it from you, that we come from, his the sort of his power, if you like, coming from him, because he was the one who brought it from you originally. He didn't need to be careful about his star for more than a period of 3 years. Okay, we've got 3 years, and you didn't object in those 3 years. Shimon bought it from you, okay, and we are all extending ourselves. We come from him because we bought it from him as successive people buying, right? He didn't need to be careful more than 3 years. Reuven meishiv, and Reuven responds. Reuven answers, "Lefi shekol echad mikem lo hechzik shalosh shonim elo shana lo chashti limchos." Reuven answers and says, because each of you wasn't machzik 3 years, only 1 year, lo shana only 1 year, lo chashti limchos, right? I didn't bother objecting. Okay. Because I saw you're not behaving in a normal way. The whole point is chazaka is normal usage. The way people normally use property, use land. I didn't know I didn't know that because you were selling one to another at the end of the year, therefore therefore each one only had a chazaka for a year. I didn't know that. What did I see? He says, Reuven says, I saw Shimon there 1 year, Levi there another year, and you're there a 3rd year. I thought, well, this is ridiculous. They're clearly not safe. They're clearly not safe in their possession. They're not assured of their ownership. And that's why they're farming it out. They're showing out. Well, you be there a little bit, you be there a little bit, you be there a little bit, and we'll get away with it. We'll drag it out, right? You understand? The whole point is if Reuven, who is the person who's claiming ownership and claiming he never sold it, if he has got a way of saying that you did not behave normally, that shows that is a proof that you don't own it. It's a proof you're just trying to get away with it, right? Through squatting in it illegally. So that's the claim and counterclaim. Yeah, that's the thing. Always you've got to remember another name for Cheskes Abatim could be Toyin V'nitzan. That's what the Rambam calls it, right? The Rambam is not only on Cheskes Abatim, but Hilchos Toyin V'nitzan in the Rambam is claim and counterclaim. Toyin, the person who makes the claim, and the Nitan, the one who is claimed against, right? Toyin V'nitzan. And that's really what we see the whole way through. Yeah, there's always a claim and a counterclaim. So we're clear on the claim, we're clear on the counterclaim. The counterclaim is Reuven comes along and says, this land is mine. It's not yours. And the proof is you haven't behaved normally. And the person who and the Nitzan, the one he's claiming against, says, what do you mean? 3 years. And that's just how we did it. We bought it from each other. Right? Okay, that was all it was. Therefore, we only were there for a year.
I missed something. Where's the having to say 3 people can share? So, why would you think?
Why would you think that they can share a chazaka?
That's what they're saying they're doing.
Well, think about it. What is the logic of chazaka? The logic of chazaka is that after 3 years, no one's careful with their shtaros. Okay, so that logic still applies, because the person who's in it now, remember, really Reuven is against Yehuda. He's the one in the land now. Person number 3. Yehuda says we have no shtar, and the reason we have no shtar is because 3 years ago Shema brought it. No one keeps shtars for 3 years.
But he's the first stars in this transmission.
Pardon?
There are 2 stars in this.
That still exists.
Yeah.
Maybe the second, but they're irrelevant. They're not going to help us.
Because the original stars.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. You're right. There should be 2 later. Yeah. The second 2 stars, but they're not going to help us, those 2 stars, right? We want the first one, and the first one's gone. So the logic is that even though it's 3 different people joining together, right? Ultimately, you could argue that's irrelevant. That's just the latest story of what developed and what happened subsequently. It's not really relevant. Ultimately, what you have is you have a situation of a person who made a transaction. That transaction was a long time ago, it was 3 years ago. People don't keep documents. The Chazal therefore say you protect people in that situation as long as they've got chazaka and a taina. Yehuda says, I've got chazaka. The land was bought 3 years ago. He didn't keep the shtar. I've got it now. I'm sitting in the land, and you didn't object. Are you going to tell me you didn't object because you saw 3 different people there? So what? It's a logical assumption to make. We bought it from each other over those 2 years. Property changes hands. It's not unusual. It's not unusual. I saw a beautiful idea today about property. This is very relevant to this. I actually mentioned it. I mentioned it with Levi. That's why I, unfortunately, sad to say I mentioned it Levi, but as I did say Levi. So forgive me, Avrami, who's really heard it. Rafash says that there's twice in the Torah. 2 times in the Torah describes buying and selling in detail. Only twice in Tanakh. In detail, buying and selling of acquisition of land. One is Chaisara, this week's parsha, right? And you know when the second one is? Avrami can't answer. Pardon? No, it doesn't say in detail. Not in detail. No, also they're not. He buys it. He buys the gur and he buys it from him, but not in terms of detailed description of the buying of property or buying of land. In Tanakh. Anyway, that's a bit tricky. Yeah. No. It's a good question actually, because the gur and I know this about. Pardon? Bias. Okay, look, you can probably the other examples. Anyway, he highlights these 2 examples as the primary examples when the Torah goes into detail about buying property. Second one is Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Yirmiyahu Hanavi is told to buy a field just after the Golus of Bovel is announced, right? So he's told he has to prophesy that they're going to go into Golus and Bovel for 70 years. And he's told to go, I think his name was Hanamel. He had to go and buy a field from Hanamel. I think it was a relative of his. He had to acquire the field. And he's told to go exactly, it's spread out in detail and say, Yirmiyahu has to buy the field. Why is he buying the field? Because they're going into Golus. And the message is, you're going to come back, right? It says clearly, in fact, we actually referred to this story at the beginning of the Perek. It was a long time ago, when the Gemora tried to prove 3 years. And the original attempts from the Gemora was to try and prove it from Psukim. And one of the attempts of the Gemara was from Yirmiyahu Perek Lamed Beis. Sodos b'kesef yirganu v'chosud b'sefer v'chosim. The Novi was Omid Be'esem, Mazal Achazim. Gemora brought it on the Chosam base, right? That
It's one of, I think it's after Shabbos, the week before Shabbos Chazon, isn't it? It's after Tomatis.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it is that. Is it that? Yeah. Is it that? Is it that one?
It's either that or the previous. It's certainly one of the.
It's definitely not the. It's not the first of the.
I think it's the second of the three. Yeah.
Is he not Bahar, Richie? So
I'll look it up.
I have a feeling it's Bahar. I know what you mean. I know what you mean, and it might be there's anyway. Okay. Well, anyway, while people are looking up, anyway. So anyway, the point is like this. It's a beautiful thought. These two examples at the beginning of it's about. Although I said it slightly differently today, but it's to say you'll see. The idea is like this. Avraham Avinu buys the field in order to build Moras Machpelah, to make sure that there's an established future in the land and the etc. for the people for the Achuzas Kever, etc. And Yirmiyahu Hanavi is told to buy this field so that they will come back in order to, and they will have a chizuk where they're going, that they will always know they're going to come back to Eretz Yisrael. First says that the message the Torah is trying to tell us is that what the idea of owning land is. But the idea of acquiring property, that's why the Torah teaches methods of acquisition of Kinyan through these two examples. Because the Torah is trying to tell us, why should a person want to acquire things, want to acquire land, for example, always for spiritual aims, always for an ultimate purpose of furthering, not just for the financial gain alone. You understand? Avraham Avinu is not buying the field for the purpose of owning the field. He's buying the field for an achuzas kever. Yirmiyahu Hanavi is buying the field so that the people going into Golos have a chizuk they're going to return. The point is, the Torah tells us, whenever you make acquisitions, think about why. Think about the ultimate aim. What is the purpose? What is the purpose? Is it chesed, stocker, Torah, whatever it's going to be? But you understand, there should be an ultimate aim in the acquisitions we make. That's what Rafash.
After Bahar, you're quite right. You're right.
Okay.
After Bahar, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Fine. So this is anyway. This is how it is. So this is a nice idea about acquiring property. So now we come to mitzdarfin. Now mitzdarfin. So this is determinative. Now the Gemora says mitzdarfin. What does mitzdarfin? It says in the next Rashbam, mitzdarfin al kuchos. The buyers join together. The yafsid Reuven, and Reuven loses out. He's finished. Right. The Ma'arez claim goes out the window. The Kiv and the Bishtar, since they purchased using a shtar one from another, as Rav explains, as we're going to see, right? Edim shebishtar of gulakola. The Edim in the shtar produce a coil. Everyone knows about it. And Reuven knew about it. He knew what was going on. Because by definition, if there's a shtar, Rav's going to define mitzdarfin only applies when there's a shtar. Because then people know about it. And because he didn't object, hifsid. Therefore, he loses out, right? Al v'lo shtar. If there was no shtar, he can taina. You know why I didn't object? Because now there was no one of you that had it for 3 years. And you weren't machzik in a normal way, as we said above. In the case of the maidservant, there was a case above. In the case of Chof Tesam base, the case of the Amsa, where there was a person who used her services 1 year, year 1, year 3, and year 5, and the other one used she worked for the other person 2nd year, the 4th year, and the 6th year, right? And Rava said, "Why did you behave in this way? So you shouldn't cause each a chazak against." So no one, you did alternate years, so neither of you could be machzik against each other. Neither of you could have over 3 years. Remember, avodim are in the Mishnah. Cheskes abatim and avodim is one of the things in that list, right? If so, he said, just like you don't have a chazaka against each other, so there's no one. You don't have chazaka of anyone else either, right? Okay, but we said the same thing there. We said that all applies when there's no itra. Itra is a shtar chalukah. If there was a shtar, yeah, that means to say, your financial arrangement that you split the maidservant between you 1 year each, if that was documented in a shtar, then of course it's a good chazaka.
You need the shtar.
Yeah, because the shtar is the same thing as having 3 complete years together. Because everyone's going to hear about a shtar. That is the purpose of a shtar. That's what a shtar does. it publicizes things, it makes people know about it, and it's Eidim, yeah, and he should have objected. Okay? That's how it is. So that's why the Rashbam brings that Gemara, because it's almost the same as here. The same idea. Omar Rav says the Gemara of Kulam B'Shtar. Rav says all is when they join together, only when they all have a shtar. Lemeimra, does this mean to say the Sova Rav shtar isle kola ve'edim leslehu kola? Does that mean that Rav holds that a shtar has a coil? That means to say people know about a shtar, okay? But, and we'll hear about it, but edim do not. Edim leslehu kola. Because that's the implication. Because if you sell, he says it has to be a shtar, but just selling with witnesses to edim is not good enough. Omar Rav, surely Rav says, he says the other way around. Or it's not necessarily the other way around, but you see, it clearly says, you sell a field with witnesses, with edim, you can claim from nechosim shobadim. What's nechosim shobadim? Nechosim shobadim is property, mortgage or charge exactly to someone else. The buyer can claim even property which he had sold to someone else, etc., etc. And the reason is because as long as they're subsequent, obviously to his, as long as the sale was subsequent to his own, he has like a first charge on the property, effectively, right? And that means that he is able to go to those people and claim the land. You understand? Yeah. Reuven sells some property to Shimon, but achrayas. That means to say, he guarantees that they will be able to take it. And then he sells other stuff to someone else, to Levi. So Shimon, if he loses the property, he can go to Levi and claim it, right? And that means he can even claim it from and he can even claim it there, even if there's only with Eidim. So the Gemara answers, Hossam over there, Lekuchos, even though you sold it with witnesses, with Eidim, without a shtar, right? There's no coil. They have to look into it. But there, they themselves effectively are throwing it away because they should have looked into it. That means to say the subsequent purchasers, right, from Reuven, in the case of where you sell it to Shimon and then you sell it afterwards to Levi. So Levi, it's his own fault. You understand? It's Levi's responsibility. It's like buyer beware, right? Yeah. He should have made sure there was no one who had a charge on the property. The first thing you've got to check when you buy a piece of land, okay? Pardon? What? Yeah, exactly. And make sure there's no one else who's got a charge before you on this property, or someone else going to come and get it from you, right? And they didn't do that, and that's their own fault. Yeah, but when it comes to the shalosh lekuchos, why should you make the person, the three buyers in our case, why should the ma'arer lose out? There's no, there was no shtar, and we're saying that Eidim alone don't produce a coil, right? And therefore he is it's a straightforward thing for him to say, I saw three different people in the land. That means there wasn't a proper chazaka. You were afraid to be machzik, and therefore I didn't bother objecting. There's a difference. In other words, what the Gemara's doing, the Gemara's answering it by, again, what was the problem we had? The problem is it seems to be a contradiction in Rav. Here he says it has to be a shtar. There he says, Eidim also good enough. So we're answering it by saying it's not that Rav holds that Eidim produce a coil the same way of a shtar. It's not that. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that, right? It's that Eidim produce, we'll see, the Rashbam says, it seems like a little coil. Eidim are not as good as a shtar. But with a bit of detective work, a bit of digging around, you'll discover that a sale was made if there were Eidim. It's a bit like chavra isle. If something was done in front of Eidim, then someone's going to know about it, right? All he had to do was phone the next door neighbors and say, was there any sales that went on? Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? You with me? Right? You understand? So in other words, a bit of detective work, you'd find out if something had been sold with Eidim. And that's enough. That is enough for someone who is a subsequent buyer, because he should have done that. He should have done the surveys on the land. We expect that. That's a reasonable thing to expect him to do that little bit of investigation and find out. And therefore, that's why Rav says there, Yeah, that by selling it with Eidim, you understand? That's why that's good enough. That is why that is good enough to allow the person, the person who's got the first charge, right, Shimon, to go and claim it, because he should have found that out. But that doesn't apply in the case of the three people here, because how on earth how Reuven is not doing any digging? Why should he? He's got no reason to do that. Okay, so let's see the Rashbam. So it's just about 7 lines up, 5 lines, 6 lines. All have to be a shtar. He's going on the last 2 purchases of a lekech rishon. The first buyer who bought it from the Ma'arer, what are we interested in his shtar? We're not interested in his shtar at all. Okay. Rashbam makes a very important point here. If Shimon has a shtar that he bought it from Reuven, the whole story and the whole case falls away. Because it's obvious he can't be Ma'ara. Reuven can't claim it's mine if there's a document that he sold to Shimon. So when Rav says Kulan B'shtar, he means that we have to make sure that the shtaros of Levi and Yehuda are intact. If the shtaros of Levi and Yehuda are intact, that means, follow this carefully, that means like this. The piece that joins the 3 together is now present. Why? Shimon bought his 3 years ago, so we don't expect him to have a shtar. He lost his shtar, that's fine, right? What's missing is the evidence that links the 3 into 3 years. And a shtar does that. Because a shtar means that Reuven, the owner of the field, for sure would have heard about the sale from Shimon to Levi. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he would have heard about it, and because we're convinced that he heard about it, therefore, because we're convinced that he heard about it, therefore that's
What happens if he was out of the country?
pardon?
Out of the country.
Who?
Okay.
Doesn't make a difference. Then it follows the normal rules.
If there's a
No, it follows all the that sug is a separate sug. Yeah, if he's in a place where he would never hear or something else, or because there's no travel between, that's fair enough. We're not going down. That's all the same. That's all the same. But the point is that by having shtaros between the second 2 people, right, the second 2 purchases, it means the fact there's 3 separate individuals is now irrelevant. Yeah, not irrelevant. Because he would hear about it. Okay, he would hear about it. Again, I know your problem is, Jeremy. You're asking how's he going to hear about it. The answer is that's the same as any case of chazaka. There's no difference now. It's no different now,
You
right?
think that because Shimon sold it to Levi and there's a shtar,
Yes.
that it is implicit that Reuven would have heard that Shimon had sold it to Levi, and therefore, had he not sold it to Shimon in the first place, he would have objected at that point. Is that what you're saying?
I don't even know if it's that he would have objected at the point that Shimon sold it to Levi. But at some point in the 3 years, okay, he would have objected. Because he would have known that it's his land that people are passing off and claiming as their own. Who cares whether it's this person, or that person? They are doing it in public and they're selling it in public. So his whole claim of, hey, you didn't act normally, you were pretending, you were just like hiding away from me, and therefore you had it 1 year, you had it 1 year, you had it 1 year. No, what do you mean? That's not true. We sold it publicly and clearly, and therefore you knew about it, and you should have said, it wasn't like that.
Can he claim that it's mendacious gossip?
What do you mean about who?
Can Reuven claim that he heard, but he just didn't pay attention to it because it was incredible? It wasn't.
What do you mean? It's in his own interest too.
That's what I mean.
That's the thing. No one would do that. You wouldn't do that. If you saw people trying to, if you went on eBay tonight, Chas v'sholom, and you saw your house for sale. No, eBay. No, I'm selling you, and seriously, that's the same thing. You've got to think of it in modern terms, right? You went and you see, or you go to Sotheby's website. Hey, they're selling this house in Hinton. I can't believe that's my house. Do you understand? What are you going to do? Yeah, you'll be on the out of hours service straight away, right? You'll be phoning them saying, "How on earth are you selling that property? It's mine." That's the same thing. It's the same thing. Public knowledge. It becomes known. Look at the next Rosh Hashanah. He says it. Shtar islei kola. Shenim asfin. They gather together, to sign it, to write it, and to sign it. Like Showman, everyone hears. Everyone hears. It's the same as putting it on eBay. You're going to hear about it. And therefore, of course, if it's yours, you should object. The Eidim, but with the Gemara then asked, the Eidim leslu kola. But the implication is that Eidim is not good enough. Mechira be'Eidim below shtar, selling with witnesses without shtar is not good enough. Eidim is not kol. So that we asked the question that's contradicted. Here Rav says if a person sells a field in front of Eidim, and he accepted achrayas, right? So what happened was a person sells his field in front of Eidim and he's makabel achrayas. That means he accepts responsibility that in the event that something happens to the field, I'm going to reimburse you. That's how it works, or whatever, or provided field. The lokeach can claim from the moicher even for property which he was meshabed, or mishkin means he gave them as a what's it called, a pledge, or he sold his land after this sale that he was makabel achrayas, accepted responsibility, right? The time, and the reason is mishum the Eidim mafkil kola, because the Eidim produced the koil. And the buyers know that this person sold the land with achrayas, with responsibility the first time, the first bit of land he sold. And they should have left for the seller enough what's the right word? Thank you. Unencumbered land, according to the amount he needs to fulfill the guarantee he promised. So we see Eidim lo shtar islu kola. So it seems that Eidim do produce a koil because we expect the subsequent buyers to have taken all that into account because they knew about it, because they were Eidim, right? They knew about it. And how do they take it into account? It's very simple. You want to buy more land from this guy, right? He might be a property magnate, but you've got to make sure that he still has 1,000 acres left, because you know that he has sold 1,000 acres to Ruvain before he made all these subsequent sales. And if you didn't do that, that's your own problem. So the assumption of Gemora is that's because Eidim alone produce a koil. Okay? And that's contradicted by what we said. We said you need a shtar to produce a koil. So the Gemara answers no. It's not that Eidim produce a koil. They don't. They don't. But look at the next one. Shani lekuchos, buyers are different. Last line, yeah? Even though selling with Eidim without a shtar does not have a koil. Lesle koil mimela. That means it doesn't have a koil that comes of its own accord. You know, mimela means like automatically, right? It doesn't just come. It doesn't just like everyone knows about it because they're Eidim. Unless they investigate and do searches. You see what I mean? Eidim was saying they do make a bit of a noise, but you're not going to hear about it unless you look for them, unless you try and investigate. And therefore we say, Inu afsidu anafshayu. They, the subsequent buyers, they have lost out on their own. The shodis uzayu bikti. They threw their money, top of the next stomach, they threw their money away for nothing. Shoylem lachkor yofer. They should have investigated well. Im mochar shum karka ba'achrayus. If he sold any land with a guarantee promise. But they didn't do that. That's why they lose out. In our case, with the three purchases, you should not be mafsid the ma'are. You don't make the ma'are lose out. Because since there's no document with these sales, and there's no koil which comes out of its own accord. There was no reason for Ruvain to make investigations. The main because he would say to himself, because they were afraid to be machzik in my land. Therefore, each of them only used it for 1 year. It's a logical thing for him to do. It's a logical conclusion for him to make. That's the difference in the cases. Where is the burden of responsibility lying in terms of investigating? You understand? That's the difference. Where you buy land, it's your problem. Buyer beware. You do your searches, you do your investigations. And had you done that, you would have found out because they were Eidim. It's your responsibility. You didn't do it, you lost. Right? Whereas where there are people in property and Ruvain is the original owner, and that's accepted. Everyone knows he's the original owner. So why on earth should we expect Ruvain to do more digging beneath the surface because there were Eidim that they sold it to one another. There's no reason for Reuven to do that. Unless the sound, unless he hears about it. If he hears about it, then we say, hey, you knew about it, didn't you? You knew about it, you didn't do anything, right? You knew about it and you didn't stop them. That means you accepted it. That means it's not yours. You're telling him you must have sold it originally to Shimon, right? You heard, didn't you? Right? But if Eidim alone do not produce that coal, okay, and you have to go digging for it, you can't expect Reuven to know about it because he made the logical assumption. Understand? And the logical assumption he made, completely reasonable thing for him to assume, is that the reason why there's all these different people popping up in my land, yes, because they're just squatters. They're not serious. They're not really people who are claiming ownership, right? And therefore, I didn't bother to object. And as soon as there's a hole in below the waterline of the machzik, right, like this, yeah, something that shakes his claim, then we say, thank you very much. The Morikama's right to claim, remains intact. Or to put it in other parlance, which we mentioned many times, of the Ketsos, who says the Chazal put a thing in place to protect buyers. Again, that doesn't kick in. That does not kick in, because that only kicks in when the machzik follows the rules. When he did everything right, he bought it, etc. He 3 years. Well, you don't know whether he bought it, but he was there for 3 years. He did everything right. He used it normally, and he still lost the document. Okay, which is normal for him to do after 3 years. Because I'll say, well, I can't let people lose their land all the time. We've got to make sure that we have a way of protecting it. Yeah.
It's not the worst case, in the sense that because what Chazal is saying is that Yehuda needs to have got hold of and kept the shtar bechira near from both Shimon and Levi, and I would have thought that once I've sold something, I sold it with a shtar to someone else, they need to worry about.
Who's got to get hold of the shtar? Yehuda doesn't have to get hold of the shtar.
Yehuda needs to be able to. He's got no case of chazaka, and they've got no case of the three of them having a chazaka.
Oh, you mean he has to be able to present the shtar?
Yeah, he should be able to be. He in order to actually be able to shut the ma'ara up, he needs to be able to have the shtar acher between Reuben and Shimon.
Okay.
I'm saying that's gone because that was over 3 years ago. But actually, if he had that, then the whole case was dismissed. And the ma'ara has got a very good time. He goes, because there's a different person in my land every year. So why should I even come and be? So there's this like uncovered middle ground, which seems quite unfair on Bokeh. Because if I'm Yehuda and I've only held the field for 1 year, I've got a clear document of purchase. There should be no reason why Reuben's got to terminate it.
I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, you without a chazaka, without a 3 years chazaka present, or something which substitutes for it, so you don't have anything. Your biggest.
I've got the shtar that I bought it from Levi.
Right.
Levi might even have the shtar that he bought it from.
So we encountered that case before, and we said that's not good enough. In order to say that Ta'aninon l'lokech or whatever to a buyer, he's got to have evidence that say the guy lived in it for one year, whatever it is. Here, there's another issue, and that is because the cases we said before were issues where there was no problem with the chazaka. Person number 2 had it for 3 years. It's just that he bought it from person number 1, and therefore there was a break in the chain that way. Here, there's more problematic, because here, everyone agrees they've only had it for 1 year. So therefore, you haven't got the 3 years. It's a parallel sugya to the previous sugya. The previous sugya was about where the changing hands was a problem in the taina, not in the chazaka. Here, this sugya is about where the changing hands are probably in the chazaka, not the taina. That's why.
But the maskana of both of these cases should be that if you're buying a piece of land, you have to make sure that you've got at least 3 years worth of provenance to that land.
Correct.
Anyone coming.
Correct. That's what comes out precisely. You still have to have that. You have to have some way of proving that. Now the Gemora asks, to me, Omar Rav Hochi, does Rav actually say this, that when you sell land ba'achrayas with Eidim, without a shtar, the buyer can claim from nechosim which have been property which is meshubah to someone else, right? In other words, it's enough that he purchased it with Eidim. We expect them to have done their due diligence and found out about it. But now the Mishnah says, very simple Mishnah. A person who lends someone else money in a shtar, so it's a documented loan, then you can claim then you're allowed to claim from property which is meshubah to someone else. Yeah? That means to say which other people bought subsequently, right? Because you're a shtar. But if you only bought it through with Eidim, then you can only claim from property that is b'nei chorin, that is not been sold to someone else subsequently. So you see clearly from this Mishnah that you need a shtar to enable you to claim from people who bought it subsequently. You need to have bought it with a shtar, because then we say they would have known about it or whatever. Or then you get the right to do that. The Chitim, you're going to suggest Rav Tanu Palik. What's the problem? Why are you asking a question on Rav from a Mishnah? We say this many times in Shas. Rav is a Tana. Rav can argue the Mishnah. That's not true though, because here, Rav and Shmuel said together, they both said, Milva al peh, Eino Gover lo min hayoshim, v'lo min alukulchais, an oral loan, a loan that is non-documented. That means with Eidim. You lent with Eidim, but there's no shtar. You can't claim. Now you cannot claim Eino Gover lo min hayoshim, v'lo min alukulchais. You can't claim from people who have inherited, or from people who have bought it subsequently. Okay. So this is how it is. So what do we see from here? That at least with a loan, okay, at least with a loan, that is not going to give you the right to claim, even if there was Vedim to the loan, it's not going to give you the right to claim from people who subsequently bought the property. Okay? So on that, the Gemora answers, there's a clear distinction. Malva azvini koromis. You're asking a question from a loan on a sale. We're not talking about loans here. We're talking about sales. Milva, when it comes to a loan, ki ka yosef, but sinok yosef. A person borrows money in private, or he lends money in private, borrows money in private. Ki heichi to litzru nichse olei. So everyone shouldn't degrade the value of his property. What happens if a person borrows lots of money? So people then they devalue, right? Devalue his property because he wants to sell land. People shouldn't think that he is pressed to sell the land to repay the debts. Okay, you understand? Because what happens if people realize that he's desperate for money to repay the debts? Yeah, the price goes up, down.
He's desperate.
Yeah, down. And therefore, the point is like this, is because people, generally speaking, borrow money in private, how on earth would the buyers, subsequent buyers from this guy who borrowed money and then sold land, how are they going to hear about it? They're not going to know that he's in debt. He took great pains. There may have been Aiden there, but he dafka did it in a subterranean basement so that no one would know, right, about him borrowing money. He did it very top secret because he wants to make sure that afterwards he can sell land. No one knows that he actually owes money. Bit of a crook. But anyway, that's how it is. And therefore, that's why we can't expect them around. And that's why Rabbi Shmuel said that if you understand that if you borrow money, yes, if you're a malva and it's only a malva al peh, not a shtar, you can't claim from the kuchas because how on earth would they know about it? People who bought from him afterwards. However, Zvini, a person who sells land, man dezovin ara, but farhesiasovin. When a person sells land, he does it in public. He does it in public. He wants people to buy it, okay? And he wants people to buy it. So that a kol should be established. That's what he wants. He wants people to come and hear that he's selling land. He's buying. He wants people to come and buy it. And therefore, had the buyers, we go back to what we said originally, had the buyers done a proper investigation, just scratched beneath the surface, they for sure would have found out that this person had sold land originally to someone else and that they stood to lose. Okay? So therefore we stick with what we said. We're saying like this. The question was first on Rav from the Mishnah. On that we can say Rav disagrees with the Mishnah, that's fine. Then we had a statement that Rav and Shmuel themselves, Rav himself says, you can't claim from the Kuchas. On that we answer no. Rav was talking about a loan, right? I lend money, you understand the story. Reuven lends money to Shimon on Monday. Reuven has money to Shimon on Monday. He lends him £1,000, right? And Shimon then sells. That's right. Shimon then has property separate to the loan. He's borrowed money, but he has property, and he sells that property on Tuesday, right? On Tuesday, he sells that property to Yehuda, for example, right? Okay. Now, later, Reuven comes along and he says, I'm going to claim my debt from the property that he sold to Yehuda. So Yehuda's going to come around and say, I had no idea he owed money. Like, how did I know? How on earth did I know, right? That how did I know that Shimon, who I bought the land from, had previously borrowed money from Reuven the day before? He did it all secretly and privately, so I had no idea. And therefore, Rav and Shmuel say, we've got to protect this guy. We've got to protect Yehuda. It's not fair. There's no way you would know about that. And that's why you can't claim for the place, right? Whereas when it comes to a sale, property that is sold, it's a different story. There, everyone knows about it. So if everyone knows about it, you should have known. You should have known. If you bought subsequently, again, the same, right? Reuven buys property, or he has a commitment from Yehuda to get, he buys property, ba'achrayas. That means if something happens and it's lost or whatever, someone else takes it, or whatever, I can claim from you, okay?
He doesn't buy from you.
Who?
Reuven.
We mix up the people a little bit, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Reuven is a person who buys property from Shimon. Let's do it like that. Reuven buys property from Shimon, okay? And something happens, and he says he comes knocking on Shimon's door and says, you gave me a guarantee. So pay up. And Shimon says, what do you mean? Guarantee? I don't have any more land. It's all gone. So he says, no problem. Who did you sell it to after me? Because I'm a first charge on the property, right? So he says, I sold it to Yehuda down the road. So he knocks on Yehuda's door. And Yehuda said, I had no idea. So we say, come on. What do you mean you had no idea? What do you mean you had no idea that Shimon sold a piece of land to Reuven Bachrais before you? Of course you did. It was public knowledge. Everyone knows when you make a sale today, it's publicized, it's put in the classified ads, and it's all there, right? There's no such thing. And therefore you should have buyer beware. When you bought subsequently the next day, you should have made sure, you should have checked it out. Let's see the Rashbam.
So, but it also seems that from this case and a previous case that a mechir with a star becomes more publicly known than a mechir purely just like Aiden.
Yes, that's true. We're not denying that. We're not denying that. It does, absolutely.
No, I just find that bizarre because mechir with a star means it's on paper and you've got like a paper.
That's why it's more. That's what.
No, I thought the other way around, where people know about it because you've got Aiden.
No, a star is what people know about, much more than Adim. It's just that Adim you should be able to find out about if you do investigations. Yeah. Let's see the Rashbam very quickly. Did Rav say the second Rashbam? The mechiras karka ba'achrayas be'edim below star, the selling land with a guarantee with Adim without a star. Go velokech, the buyer can claim kashiyat reform imenu. When they take it from him, he can claim in a chosim shobodim from property which is subsequently sold to someone else. It's meshubad, enslaved to someone else. Bishtar. So he says, if you sell, the Mishnah said this is on the Mishnah still. The Mishnah says if you lend with a star, the star go in a chosim shabbat. Star the stam star la'achrayas nichtav, because the star it's assumed that it was written as a guarantee. Even if it isn't written in the star, there's achrayas. Chaim we hold achrayas Toras sofa. These are tzugis elsewhere. But achrayas is like a mistake of the sofa or commission nichtav domi. If you write a star and you didn't put in it that there's a guarantee on the property, it's assumed. It's an assumed clause. You have that in shtaros in documents, right? There's an assumed clause. You can buy from buyers. You can claim it from buyers. For example, the case is the way he didn't leave. Not for example, the case is that he did not leave for the borrower other unencumbered property to claim the debt from them. Clearly, when you're coming to claim, you've got to first go to the what?
Unencumbered.
Yes, exactly. Before you go to the buyers, the lekuches, right? But if it's through witnesses, claim below star without a star and chosim, you claim from nechosim b'nei chorin. You claim from nechosim b'nei chorin. That means unencumbered property. You could go in shemoida shalei paroi. The case is that he admitted that he didn't pay off. Hamal v'chavero be'edim ain't tzarech l'paro be'edim. A person who lends someone with edim, he doesn't need to pay him off with Adim. So therefore, the scenario is that the case has to be that he agrees that he hadn't paid the debt off. because otherwise we're gonna. If he says I paid it off, well, you're gonna be believed because you don't have to pay back with Aiden. But he can't claim from a shubad property, enslaved property to others. The Aiden below star less lu kola, because Aiden without a star have no coil. No one knows about it. Below and we don't say the kuchas of Sidon of Shayu that the buyers lost out themselves. The Kashid Rav, this is a problem with for Rav. And the Gemara answers it's not. Even though Rav made that statement there, that's because we answered that saying Rav Tanu. Rav can argue with the Mishnah, but then we said Rav himself makes that statement. Milva peh, I know Milva is malvus chver be'edim. First, and then someone else with witnesses. Ain't no govim no in a yerushin. He can't claim from inherit in people who inherit. Tamam farshim mechiltin. The point about people who inherit yerushin is explained at the end of the Masechta. Shibud alav da'iraisa. That shibud alav da'iraisa. The shibud is not minat Torah, and that's why he's not allowed to claim from those, not able to claim from Yerushim. We don't hold like this. As it's explained over there, we in fact hold you can claim from Yerushim. I think it might be because of Shibud is Doraisa. The property is the Shibud to the person originally is Minat Torah. But you can't claim from Lekuchas. Again, that's a little bit in brackets. We're not dealing with Yerushim, right? But Ashram is just pointing out that actually this point about not being able to claim from Yerushim is not, the halacha is not like that. The halacha is you actually can claim from Yerushim, even a milva al peh, because the shibud, his claim to it, that it's shibud is actually minat Torah. Yosef and Ishpatzina, but the chiluk we make is the two are not comparable. A person borrows money in private. He requests, he doesn't want to publicize it. So he comes to sell land. People won't think and understand. They won't know that he's pressured because he needs to pay back a debt. They won't buy from him at a high price. Okay, if they knew that. What could the buyers do? They had no idea. They didn't know about this. The man is in a person who sells, he sells in public. So people who buy it should jump on it. The buyers lost out themselves. If they had investigated properly, they would have heard from people. But this seller had already sold property b'achrayas, right? He would have found out. They would have found out. And the fact they didn't do their due diligence means it's their own fault. And therefore, that's the maskana, that we stick with what we said before. The Rav holds that we expect people who buy property, if they buy property, they should have done their due diligence. They should have found out if there was someone beforehand. But that doesn't affect our scenario that we started with, where the ma'arer, it's not something, just Adam alone, it's not something you know about. You have to start doing investigations. He wasn't expected to know that. And as a result, unless it's a star, which everyone knows about, there's no, then it will stay with the ma'arer. Very good. Okay, apologies, no share next week. We're away for a couple of days. So the share afterwards, just midweek. And therefore the share next will be the week after. Okay.
First.
Okay. See you soon.